Welcome, rockers and fellow horse nerds. Look who I've got. I've got Richard Williams, who is the publisher of Xenophon Press. And if you do not know Xenophon Press yet, you need to, because if you're interested in any of the old masters' stuff, there's really only one publishing house out there that is publishing all this old dead dude stuff that we all need to work from, and that's him. And full disclosure, no, he is not subsidizing or sponsoring this YouTube thing. It's just that we're really interested because we're super nerdy. So what we want to talk about is the half halt. Everyone gets confused about the half halt with good reason, because different people mean different things by it. There are, in fact, a bunch of different types of half halt, and knowing which one to use when, well, that's a thing. And what is very interesting is if one starts in the 18th century with Monsieur François Robichon de la Guérinière, who was, of course, sitteth upon the right hand of God, as we know, in the dressage old dead dudes world. He's the guy who everyone says invented the shoulder in and shows you how to get to the piaffe and all of that stuff. He is like the dude. You have to know your La Guérinière. If you think the Spanish riding school is cool, if you think the Portuguese school is cool, if you think any of these places are cool, it's because they kind of work to Monsieur La Guérinière. All right, but he talks about half halts in a completely different way to what you think it should be, or what you've probably been told by your riding instructor. The 18th century half halt is not done with the outside rein, but with the inside rein, and with this interesting upturn of the wrist. It is not a drawback. It is not a pull. So why is this? And should we still use it? Can we still use it? And then why on earth did people start thinking, well, it was about the outside rein? So make sure you stick around to the end, because we're going to be going into how it transitioned one to the other. But don't think that because it's an old dead dude from the 18th century that this doesn't make sense in the modern context anymore. You need to know how to do this first kind of La Guérinière half halt. So I'm going to ask Monsieur Richard Williams from Xenophon Press to perhaps, would you read us what Monsieur La Guérinière says? And then could you help us interpret it, please?
Yeah.
Because old dead dude stuff sometimes needs a bit of translation.
I don't know if you can zoom in on that, or is that visible? This is kind of probably the most famous engraving. It's also on the back of the book. This is the quintessential engraving with Mr. de la Guérinière standing at the right side of this picture, and then a rider, a very good rider. But you'll see that this rider has quite a long stirrup length. So the name of this stirrup length is à la bride.
À la bride.
So this is early 18th century style and way of riding with very long stirrups, and the shortened stirrup that comes later, gets adopted widely throughout Europe, à la genette, is when your calf and a lot more of the lower leg is more in contact with the horse. And that's a whole other subject. But I think just having this visual picture of the 18th century, when the rider's presence was his torso, his or her torso, the upper leg, the knee, and just the top bit of the calf.
This is going to explain why they're using this half halt that you can see here. Also notice that we are in a curb bit here, right? We're not, our old dead dude here, or our young dead dude here, is not riding in a snaffle.
Right.
So this is also something to bear in mind. By the time these guys are riding what they would call a dressed horse, the horse has graduated from the filet, which is the snaffle, which we think of as mostly the main bit, to the curb. So just hold that in mind as well.
And also, with this curb, it's not a double bridle, it is a single bridle with long shanks. These long shanks have a big bar that comes up above where the cannon is, and it also extends down below. So if you think of this, the closest thing that we would have in a snaffle bridle would be like a full cheek, where we have a large bar on this. So,
or perhaps a boucher type of
right,
thing
or
as
a
well,
boucher, which is like half of that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So let's say you're doing a half halt, and I will read that in a minute. When you're doing a half halt on the left rein, you are having an effect on the left mouth of the horse, but because the left side of the bit is connected to this bar, you are having an ability to affect the right side.
And the pole as well,
and
right?
the pole,
Yeah.
well, everything. So your left half halt is not just left-sided. It does, in a way you could argue, it affects more the right side.
Okay.
Because of this, it's sort of like an iron bar.
That makes sense.
So,
all right, so let's read what he's got to say.
so this is the section in this edition. We do have another edition of School of Horsemanship by de la Guérinière, and it has a couple of additional chapters. But I'll read this section, and there's a slight change in the translation because we actually did go back to the French and adjusted just to get a more accurate meaning, and that is in the gray edition of this book. So this is entitled On the Half Halt. The half halt is the action one makes in drawing the bridle hand close to oneself with the fingernails turned slightly up. Rather than to completely halt the horse, it is used to check and support the forehand when the horse is leaning on the bit, or else when one wants to bring the horse's head down or collect him. We have said in the above, which is a preceding section, that the halt is only suited to the full halt is only used to a very small number of horses, due to the fact that there are very few of them who would have enough strength in the loins and hocks to support this action. And that is
the school halt.
The school halt, which is a very seated halt where the haunches are much lower and the forehand is very elevated with straight front legs.
Imagine a sliding stop without the slide, done more softly kind of thing.
Or a movement right before a levade, right? With the haunches lowered by 4 or 5 inches.
It's a thing you don't really see very much anymore. But they used to do it a lot, supposedly to strengthen the horses before the school jumps, the caprioles and things like that. But let's just say it was a thing. It's not really a thing anymore. But what La Guérinière is saying, that thing, that full halt, that school halt, not for every horse, only for a minority of horses. But this half halt, more universal.
So that is not the same as our A down center line X halt salute. It's not the same. That's not the same halt. In fact, even that, not to digress, but that halt was done with 2 front legs on the ground, 1 front leg lifted.
We're talking about the school halt.
The school halt, and or the other front leg lifted. So that's a whole, as you said, it's not done very much anymore. Therefore, the greatest proof of a horse's strengths and obedience is the execution of a light and steady halt after a last pace, which is rare.
He's still on the school halt there.
To go so quickly from one extreme to the other, it is necessary that the horse have an excellent mouth and haunches. To the extent that these violent halts can ruin and discourage a horse, they are only used as a test. Such, it is not the same case with a half halt, where the horse is only held slightly more in hand without being completely halted. This action does not make the horse as anxious and stabilizes his head and haunches with less constraint than does the full halt. It is for this reason that the half halt is more useful in making the horse's mouth and achieving lightness. One can often repeat the half halt without breaking the horse's gait, and since through this aid one brings the horse's head down and raises his forehand, one thus makes the horse lower his haunches at the same time, which is what is wanted. The half halt is thus suited to all types of horses, but there are certain temperaments with which it must be used sparingly. When, for example, a horse holds back on its own, one only indicates the half halt when one wants him to accept more contact in order to prevent him from stopping completely by this movement. One aids him with the inner thighs, the calves, and sometimes the spurs. depending on how much he is holding himself back. However, if the horse leans too heavily on the hand, the half halts must be more frequent and only indicated by the bridle hand without any action from the inner thigh or the legs. Rather, it is necessary to loosen the thighs, or else he would throw himself on the forehand to an even greater degree. When in indicating a halt or half halt, the horse continues to lean on the bit, to pull at the hand, and even sometimes to force the hand by moving forward, despite the rider's will, is thus necessary after having halted the horse to back him up as punishment for this disobedience.
We don't like to use the word punishment anymore.
As we would say correction.
Or, yes, I would even say to have the horse give the back,
Right.
And relax the back and come into more relaxation. Something I want you guys to think about here, you notice that La Guérinière keeps saying the bridle hand, not the bridle hands, right? So when they are working with this curb in this old style, they're riding with one hand, usually the left hand, so that the sword arm or other useful hand is free. They have, of course, taken the horse in an earlier stage called the débourrage, not the dressage, through working with two reins, and sometimes even with a cavesson rein as well. So sometimes starting with a cavesson, then going to a snaffle with a cavesson, then going to a curb with a cavesson, three reins, and then finally ditching the cavesson. And you can find this progression, like in that book he published by Eisenberg, amazing book. He talks you through that progression. La Guérinière is assuming, because you're a gentleman reading this book, and only gentlemen are reading these sort of books, that you have a horse that's already gone through this whole process. So therefore you're riding with the bridle hand, and you are doing this action to soften the horse's jaw, to bring his head down if he brings it up, to help him to sit a little bit, and to help him find his rhythm. This digression that he went into about the school halt, you can kind of edit that from your mind for now. But what he is talking about is balancing the horse. So given that in the 18th century, we're talking about riding one-handed in a curb bit with a horse that's already been prepared over some years to ride in this curb bit, they are finding this action very, very useful for the half halt. However, something that is really interesting, I think, that I have been shown by some of my Portuguese teachers, is that even in a snaffle, actually, honestly, you can really use this, and with two reins, you can use this action on the inside rein really well to soften, bring the head down, help the horse to sit as well, or give the back. But if you do that, then you have to support with the outside rein. Usually, let's say, for example, I'm riding like this, and that's my inside rein. I might put this rein down a little bit as a supporter, and then draw this up and vibrate a little bit here. Horse gives the jaw, I would caress, good boy, thank you, and go forward. So you could argue that that is a sort of a modernish reinterpretation that my Portuguese mentors gave me of what La Guérinière there was saying. But I think for me, what's fascinating is that because most of us have been taught a half halt is something you do with the outside rein or inside leg to outside rein. But there we find the first reference to it. It's not that at all. It's with a curb with the inside rein. And it's about relaxing the horse. It's what I'm getting from there. It seems to be about releasing the jaw, releasing the back. The 18th century dudes like to talk in these terms of dominance and submission. But my feeling is they don't really mean it. They seem to really mean more relaxation. What do you think about that?
No, I think, well, the other thing that I get something every time I read this book, and you were saying the same thing earlier. And the thing that I noticed in there, that he really identifies three basic categories of horses. He cautions about the horse that's very sensitive and a little bit backed off.
Yeah,
and
horse that's a bit behind the leg.
That's a little bit tending to be receding behind the contact, receding behind the leg, and not thrusting forward, but backing off a little bit. So he says with that horse, you may need to be super soft, super subtle, very, very
Sparing in the use of the half halt.
much more infrequent with those half halts, and then even when you do them, quite light, right?
Yes.
So he
Minimizing.
So he identifies that as one. Then he has kind of like a middle horse that I think he talks about, and that is that you need to close the legs a little bit before you do the half halt. So to support because he says if you just do the half halt and the haunches are not prepared, or the haunches are not readied by saying, okay, be ready and engage, so that when the weight is shifted back, then you may end up hollowing the loins, right? So he does talk about that. And then he talks about the third case where the horse is really bearing into the bridle and is really strong. And there, I think is not to, but I think to paraphrase, he's saying you're going to need repeated half halts. So you're going to have to do,
and sort of as much as necessary.
Right.
Yes, to get him to give.
And you may actually have to go to the halt. And in an extreme case, if the horse is still pushing too heavily into the rein, then you might end up with a rein back. As a correction. So you're actually moving that horse towards the first horse.
You're reminding me now, actually, of a particular lesson I had with a really good Portuguese teacher called Gonçalo Linhas, who we should get on this show, actually. And he showed me exactly that. I had a horse that was really bearing down and really barreling forward. And he said, Rupert, he showed me to count a certain number of steps in the walk, come to a halt, and then yield by supporting with the outside rein down a bit, and then this upward motion with the fingernails up, just as La Guérinière says, to the one hand. When the horse gave, caress, then left hand down, right hand up, same thing, do. Horse gives, caress, then rein back 2 steps or 4, then go forward. And he said to me, Rupert, if you do this exercise for 6 weeks, you'll have like a totally different horse. And he was dead right. And that was the same horse that Francis, your wife, was riding the other day. Brabant, remember him with those nice piafs?
Mm-hmm.
That was that horse. But when he arrived, he would just really barrel into the bridle.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, we had a modern version of that last horse because I wasn't riding in a curb bit.
Did you know why that worked?
Tell me.
Well, my theory of why that worked is when he's saying, lower your right hand. And here now we're holding the reins in 2 hands.
Yeah, so we're doing our modern interpretation of the dead dude.
And you weren't riding in a curb bit.
At that point, but I did then take it to the double bridle, and it worked just as well.
You were riding in a snaffle to begin with.
To begin with, I was riding in a snaffle.
Right. So he's starting you this exercise.
Indeed.
So the reason that works is because he's giving you the snaffle. And he's saying when the inside rein, you're making this the inside rein when the fingernails are upward and the fingernails are a little bit downward with your outside hand. He's making you have that fillet or the bridoon or the snaffle, whatever you want to call it, a little bit unequal. But he's taken the horse, and now the horse has a little bit...
So it's working on one point of the lips, but not the other.
Even though you're riding on a straight line, you are in a left positioning or a left bend. So there's unequal pressure and unequal situation on the left and the right. And then when he says, do it to the left, now do it to the right, when the horse is to the right, then he can't lean on the bit and do chin-ups as if you would hold the reins completely straight. So our goal is to straighten your horse and ride it forward, is to have this arrow straight horse. But the means to that straightening is actually not to ride him straight. It's to have a little bit of positioning right.
Like shoulder four-ish.
Yeah.
Baby shoulder four.
Or just barely positioning. Because as soon as you do this, the horse can't lean his entire weight on the bit. Because when he goes to lean on the bit slides a little bit into his mouth. And then the outside ring of the bit pushes into the side of his mouth very much the same way the shank of the curb would push in. So what he's
it prepares for the curb.
Well, he's having you ride the snaffle to make it seem like a curve.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting was at first he made me isolate everything. So we did do the full stops, yield to the other side, rein back, go forward. And then he said, what you'll find is after a few weeks, you won't need that anymore. You'll just be able to make a very small movement like this when you need it while moving, that the person on the ground can't even really see what you're doing. The horse will constantly give the back and give the pole and give the jaw and just move forward smoothly. And so eventually this is something that can be done in motion, and then eventually even at the canter, etc. And he was absolutely spot on. I ended up with a really generous functional horse from a really ungenerous dysfunctional horse. But it's interesting, until looking at that chapter of La Guérinière, I hadn't made the connection between that 18th century way of doing it and what he was showing me there.
So when you just described this and you did your hand action and you said, he said, do this, and he said, do this, notice that what he never, and what you didn't memorize in your muscle memory, he didn't say, do this, and this, and this, and
He
this.
never said
So
make a
he
wall.
never said squeeze
No.
both at the same time and release both at the same time.
Absolutely.
So one is a little bit what I call not necessarily squeezing, but I would say feeling for the contact, while the other one is relaxing for the contact. Then this one is feeling for a contact, and this one is dissipating the contact. So you're doing this in alternation, because if he's to go backward, if the horse goes backward in a straight line, he's really, as you know, if we film the horse from above, he looks like a tadpole. He doesn't actually make an arrow straight line. So as his right hind leg is deeply under his body and he has not brought it back, the spine...
We're talking about the rein back here.
Yeah, the rein back.
Yeah.
The spine is bent a little bit to the right. And then when he takes that right hind leg and actually steps it back, and the left hind leg is deeply under the body, now his spine is bent a little bit to the left. So he looks straight by being bent a little left, right, left, right, left, right, left, and never going very far through with it.
Right. Just a tendency.
It's
almost.
tendence in the horse's trunk. So he's having your hands match that.
So pass me La Guérinière again. Bonjour, Monsieur La Guérinière. I just want to now revisit what we, you know, and I'm going to now edit out, with your permission, the stuff about the school halt, because I think that might make
it's about half of the section.
So let's say once again, so bearing all that in mind, lads, so here is La Guérinière. The half halt is the action. The half halt is the action one makes in drawing the bridle hand close to oneself with the fingernails turned slightly up, rather than to completely halt the horse. It is only used to check and support. He's saying it's a support. The forehand when the horse is leaning on the bit, or else when one wants to bring his head down, or collect him. So you've got kind of three uses there. And
to review, they are to bring the horse's head around. The French would say ramener, right?
Yeah.
To prevent him from leaning on the bit. And what is the third one?
And the third one is when you want to collect him, have him sit a little bit and bring the haunches, the hind legs a little bit underneath. So he's saying it can achieve all three things. And then he's saying the half halt is thus suited to all types of horses, but there are certain temperaments where it must be used sparingly, and this is where he goes into your three types. You've got your one that wants to hold back, that's behind the leg. He's saying don't use too much half halt there. You've got your one that likes to dive and leans heavily on it. Then you've got to be more frequent with your half halts, but not using leg aids, really. He's saying doing it with the bridle hand more frequently, only indicated by the bridle hand without any aid from the inner thigh or the leg. That's interesting. So nothing to block what's happening, because legs can block, as we know, if they use too much.
Well, not to interrupt you, but staying right there, like, why no leg? You don't need leg on a horse that's got basically a charge forward, right?
Yeah.
He's already got this like surging forward. We don't need to add. It's like we don't need to add, gasoline to this fire
Absolutely.
behind us. It's already burning.
Whereas he's saying that first type of horse who's holding back, yes, you are going to use a leg aid.
Yeah, you're going to have to support. Yeah.
And then,
And so these horses that in my experience, in my, one lifetime experience, the horses that tend to be a little bit behind, if they haven't been mistrained, they're the horses that are super sensitive in the mouth.
yeah,
Would you agree?
absolutely.
And the horses that can actually tolerate, and really dive for the bit, they tend to be horses
Right.
that are sort of tough in the mouth, right?
Yes.
And so the goal there with a horse that's tough in the mouth is that you try to make them a little bit more sensitive in the mouth and not so tough, not
Right.
so numb, right?
And then what he's saying at the front, your third type of horse is the one, like I was talking about earlier, where you actually do need to use a full halt and a rein back as well. And then what you'll notice is that the next thing Monsieur la Guérinière goes to is the rein back itself.
Right.
So then he's saying, okay, if you've got one of those horses, here's how to do it. So I guess the point, lads, is that half halts vary depending on the type of horse you've got. You've got to know your horse's personality and physical type. But if you're going to try this early form of half halt, one needs to know, as Monsieur Richard is saying, that you're kind of working, even if you're in a snaffle, you're working it a little bit as if it was a curb with this slightly diagonal contact. But it's this interesting upward motion of the wrist, which they didn't teach us at Pony Club. They don't teach us in most modern dressage schools. But my goodness, is it useful. So yeah, that's where we begin. So before we go to our next thing of where did it come to be about the outside rein, any last words before we conclude?
Well, I think we should just go to the next one.
All right.
There's probably more than one.
All right, lads. So so make sure you now go to the next video, because when did it stop being about the inside hand and when did it become about the outside hand? He said, holding up Monsieur Nuno Oliveira here.
I guess I would say one more thing and another thing, as I like to
And
say.
another thing.
And one more thing. You just made me think of something. Is that what Rupert said in the beginning is that by the time de la Guérinière has the horse in his school, we're doing dressage. We're doing like these fine points of riding, and we're not doing débourrage. So we're not doing, we're not doing the basic
Go forward.
gentling in of the horse and
Circles,
getting the horse
diagonals.
used to people. So what he's talking about is rebalancing the horse.
Yeah.
These are to bring the horse back into a balance that recalls where the horse was once in a better balance, which could be more collected or with the weight not surging onto the forehand. So I think we did another session of this, and I think this idea of rebalancing, we said kind of at the beginning of the lesson, but maybe we can do this in the next
All right.
video.
Let's do
about
that.
Rebalancing.
All right. So next video, rebalancing, and when does it become about the outside rein? If you found this interesting, if you found this informative, if you found it useful, please like it. Please subscribe. Help the algorithm to help us to bring more of this good content to you. Also, do check out Xenophon Press, because they have the old dead dude stuff that we all need. And if you want to learn how to do this stuff, particularly with the in-hand work, go on our website, longridehome.com. You'll see down below there's a link for a free introductory course. And of course, if you want to come and work with us on our pony, there's an email link there. You can come and do that too. So see you on the next one.